Everyone, and thank you for attending today's Lunch and Learn session. Today's topic is on Aatrix year-end reporting with presenter Aline Cross. There's a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone is in listen-only mode, so if you do have questions, please type them into the questions box on the screen, and we will address them at the end of the session. This webinar will be recorded, and we will email out a copy to everyone within a few days. I will now turn it over to you, Aline.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to talk about some year-end housekeeping issues and to prepare for the closing of your payroll. The first thing we're going to go through are we're going to check some calculations. We're going to look a little bit at the Affordable Care Act setup on Sage 100. We'll go through the payroll audit steps, show you how to back up your data, and then close your payroll year. Then we'll go through the Aatrix, how we process Aatrix forms for both the W-2s and the 1099s after we do some vendor housekeeping also. So we're going to get started, jump right into the software. On payroll menu in our 531 calculations, the first thing you want to make sure is that some of your calculations, like your 401 that are supposed to appear on your W-2s, that they're set up properly. So we'll look at the percent of gross. This box area for reporting for your W-2, you want to make sure that you have the box 12 and your correct code in here for the W-2. Now we do provide that list for you. Sage 100 has the full list of box 12 codes and also the suggestions for what should be in box 14, which would include health insurance, union dues, those type of items. With the difference between the two, the box 12 is going to have a code, and the box 14, you're going to be able to type a little abbreviation, and that abbreviation will appear on your W-2 form. Okay, so that's the first thing you want to do to make sure those are set up. Now for the new reporting this year, on 521, your employee records, we'll just pick the first employee. This Affordable Care Act appeared last year. Some of you are aware of that. Some may not. You want to make sure to fill this out and track your hours for your eligible employees. Now there are reporting requirements. Effective for 2015, if you provide self-insured health coverage for your employees, you must file an annual return. And it's going to depend if you're over 50 or under 50 employees, which forms you fill out. Also, if you're over 50 employees, you have to show whether and what health insurance that you are offering your employees. These coverages you'll get from the IRS website, which we do provide in our PowerPoint. The Affordable Care Act website, if you go there, will help you to fill out all that information on this sheet. So this will all be provided for you at the end of the session. There are the forms that you'll use are the 1094 or 1095 B and C. Again, it's going to depend on 50 employees or more. So you want to make sure to fill that out, and that you'll be able to report your hours for the Affordable Care Act. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go in and show you how to do the payroll audit. So under your 537, and you should probably perform this at least quarterly, if not monthly. What this will do is make sure that anything that's out of sync in your payroll lines up. And you just come into 537 and hit audit. It is going to give you a list if you have any errors. A lot of common errors are going to be the uncomputed records. If you do a quarter and a check date mismatch, it's going to print those out. And then if we look at the audit report, we just come right in and do a print preview. It's going to tell you exactly what's wrong. Right now it's telling me I have an uncomputed record. Maybe that's something I forgot to void, but I can go right into my record number and find the error and fix it. I can either process the check or void it. And that's it. sometimes you can just hit repair and it's going to fix things. If there are bigger issues, you may want to contact your consultant and see what's going on, or you may want to call Sage Support for some additional help with audit errors. Now, backing up, if you have your IT company doing your backups on a regular basis, that's a good thing. If you want to do your own backups, the easiest way to do a backup is to find your MB7 folder, and I'm going to go in my test folder. Inside your MB7 folder is your data folder, and you're just going to right-click and compress it. From compressing it, it creates a zip folder. You can save that on a thumb drive. You can save it in a different area, but that will back up your year-end for you in a quick, simple way. Once you get that done, you can close the year at that point, and you can continue to work in your current year without your payroll there. If you close your year, it's going to send it to an archive company. You can name that. I suggest naming it fairly easily, just a year end. If you want to include any images, you can. At this point, you can go ahead and remove any laid off, terminated employees. You can also approve each employee's removal because there may be some that you've laid off that you may want to bring back later and you don't want to remove them from your data. When you close that, it's going to empty out all of your payroll completely. You can then access your file by changing your company and showing your archives, and that archive folder will be in there. You can also process your W-2s and your reporting requirements at that time. You do not have to do it while it's an active company. So because I didn't actually close, we're going to go ahead and walk through the process of your tax filing. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to 541, Federal Forms. Now, some of you may already be using these for your quarterly reporting or your monthly reporting, and because the update hasn't come up this year yet, there's still the 2014 forms are in here. So we're just going to walk through the steps using 2014, and it should be the same steps. So we select our form and our current year that we're going to report on, and we run the report. If you do use this, there's going to be a window sometimes that comes up and asks you to update your forms. We're going to test drive. There's options to let you test drive. If you have a large database of employees, you may only want to test drive the first 25 just to make sure everything's processing properly. Or if you're feeling pretty confident you can process them, I usually recommend at least doing one test drive just to make sure everything's correct. It's going to put in your company ID number. It's going to verify your company information. This is all coming from your 7-2 setup window, and you can change any of this here also. You're usually going to be a company, you're filing for your company, unless you are a tax filer and then you're a third party. But for the most part, it's going to be filing for your company. And you can select your state. We can remove the state if we're not doing them at that time. You can edit your state, make sure that your numbers are all correct in here. You can add your local items. If you have local taxes, you'll come in and select what state you're in. We're going to pick New York, and you'll select if you're metropolitan, Yonkers, or whatever local you have to file. I'm not going to select the local at this time, but those options are all available for you. I'm going to hit the next key. Now you have some standard data verification questions. Make sure to read these. For the most part, there are going to be no. You may have employees who are exempt from Medicare and Social Security, so you have to watch for these little questions. We hit next. You can select a control box number. Number 1, you can leave it blank. You're a 941 filer. If you have third-party sick pay, you would want to include this checkbox. Third-party sick pay is if you do have somebody that's being paid, like a disability, and you have to pay their taxes, that would be what you include in there. The next thing you're going to do is select that you're a single payroll data file, unless you do have multiple, and then it's going to process our forms for us. So it's reminding me I'm in test drive so that it's not going to save this information. But when I come in here, I can see these yellow columns are not labeled. Now, I don't want this to show up on the W-2, but it's letting every calculation, it's giving me an option here if I didn't identify it. So now I know I have my 401 plan percent of gross going to box D, but I don't have my flat amount. So I want to make sure to assign this to a box. And at the time, I can select my box 12. It's going to allow me to pick from the list of codes. So I can add it, make sure that's going to show up. This is the employer portion, so it's not going to show up. Again, once we get over to union dues, I have one of them showing up. I don't have the other, so I want to make sure to add that to box 14. And it's going to grab the name right from there, so I can leave it as is. Or I can abbreviate it if it's too long. Oh, still too long. That would. We'll just put dues for now to make it fit. And you can go along and fix them there, or it's also going to remind you that you need to go back and make these changes back in your payroll calculation folders. But it's just showing you can override them at the time. Our next step, it's going to show us if we have any errors, and it identifies that a Social Security number cannot begin with an N, then 9. So I'm going to go and change that to a 7. And then it's going to go through each column, verifying my information, what's going to show up on my W-2 or what's not. It's telling me these are not showing up because I haven't identified them. And it's going to tell me there's one more assigned, and I can continue without correcting. I know which ones I want on, and these I don't want on, so I can go ahead and continue. At this point, it brings us to our option of being able to e-file directly through Aatrix. If you already have an account with Aatrix, you can set this up through them. But I also have the option that if I just want to print my W-2s, and then I can print federal and state, or I can e-file. I can uncheck and print my employer copy. It just walks through the steps. I can continue without e-filing. And it's still giving me the option to continue. So, sorry about that. Here you can include divider sheets or not. I'm not going to include them. You can order your paper. It's going to be the perforated paper. It doesn't have the coloring in it anymore. It's all filled out for you. And it's going to go through the steps, which ones are going to print. You're going to print your employer copy. You're going to print your employee copy. And you're going to print all the federal and state copies. So we can go through and look at them all. And up here is your page numbering system. So if you're scrolling down and not seeing, you want to come up here and here's your pages. And it takes you through each step. You can print them now, you can print them later. And it will just keep going through until you have all your copies. Then it will finish for you. So that's the W-2s. All your other year-end reports are in here. And when you get to the state forms on 542, and come into your state, you're going to find your state forms. And again, if you do your quarterlies, you already know that they're in here. I picked the Pennsylvania, but we have the Act 32 reporting for Pennsylvania. You have your W-3s, you have your unemployment. Some of these, like I said, are quarterly, but you can do your W-3s right from in here. And each state has their selection of forms. So if you're in New Jersey, you're going to have the 500 and the 927 and the W-3. And again, New York, you may have different forms. So each state, all your forms should be in there. And that's what happens at the beginning when you first launch Aatrix and you all get that update these forms. All states are in there, so it's going to update everything. So the next part that we do would be for the 1099s, and that's under your accounts payable. Before you start your 1099s, you want to run a list and make sure all your vendors are set up. Now I can come in here, I sort my vendors by subcontractor. I'm going to grab my subcontractor. On my financial tab, I want to make sure that I have a federal ID number and a 1099 type. You can make them undetermined or no 1099, but if they do receive a 1099, those two items of information have to be complete. And that's all the setup there is for your subcontractors. And your 1099 forms are right underneath the vendor setup on the same section, 4-5. We open it, and it's going to go through the same process as your W-2s. You select your form, you select your year, you run your report. Excuse me. I'm going to test drive. Again, the same setup windows that are in your W-2 forms. It's just making sure all your company information is accurate. I can pick my state too, and locals, you're not usually going to use your state and locals for the 1099s. It's going to ask if any receive them only electronically. You can truncate your numbers if you don't want to show them on the form, or you can print it with no truncation. And if they don't have numbers, you can put the zeros. Again, multiple data files or a single data file, and then it's going to create the form. Same thing in excuse me. Over here, these are companies, so I don't have a first name, last name, middle name, and I don't need one because over here I do have my company name receiving. You can check all your information in here. Your address is all in place, and it gives you a quick lookup to do it. Make sure all your taxpayer ID numbers are in place. And if you have to file a state, and then the same processing format, it's going to take you right through verifying everything, all your columns, and right into the e-filing again. So that's the process, and it does all start with making sure that you have your calculations set up and your information on your vendor tabs. That's about it for closing your payroll year. Again, you can do it from the archive folder, or you can do it before you close your year and archive it. So, are there any questions?
If you do have a question, please type it into the questions box, and we'll be happy to answer it for you. Right now, we do not have any questions. So I'll just give it a minute.
Okay.
Okay, it doesn't look like there's any questions. If you change your mind and you do have a question, will include our contact information on the email with the recording.
Okay.
We want to thank everyone for attending today. Oh, we do have a question here. Where do we purchase 1099 forms for Sage?
You can order them right through, if you go to your Home and Resources tab, you should be able to go to your Customer Resources and order them from the checks and forms here at Sage. And it'll take you right to their website for Sage products. And they do have different packaging options.
Will there be a separate payroll in archives versus closing out the year in archive?
Once you close your payroll and archive it, it zeroes out all of your balances in Sage 100. So when we would come into the payroll and look at the employees, oops, Sorry, picked the wrong thing. Once we pick an employee and we archive, these amounts down here are going to be completely zeroed out. It's going to be a fresh slate, and the archive company will have all of your historical data for that year. The other thing that it does that is really helpful is if you're in your payroll calculations and you've created some calculations that you no longer need or you don't want to use anymore, you can come in because they're going to be starting fresh. So let's say my 401 is set up incorrectly and I don't like the way it's set up. It's going to zero everything and give me a fresh slate so I can change or modify some of my calculations. Did that answer the question?
I think so. Yes, it did. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, well, we want to thank everyone for attending today, and we will email out a recording to everyone later today. So have a great day, everyone, and thanks again.
Thank you.